What's up, guys? It's Sebastian. Beautiful Sunday afternoon here in Warsaw. Bunch of people out. If I'm not mistaken, this area of the city is Old Town. And it is just wonderful. Good energy. A lot of good food. A lot of history. If you like that sort of thing, then you'll feel very much at home in Europe. The topic of this video is an acknowledgement of yet another Leave Canada video that I saw recently by another guy from Vancouver. And it's quite funny because his video got about 30,000 hits, as did mine when I put it out 5 years ago. Just about 5 years ago. And so I was noticing in the comments that there's quite a few people who have misconceptions or questions or just doubts in regards to how to make this happen for themselves. And that's totally understandable because everything's so unpredictable these days. A lot of people are lost. A lot of people want out. They want to figure something out. But there seems to be a lack of real solid information from people who have actually done it and figured something out that is at least halfway sustainable. So let's go through them one by one. One of the first things that people are concerned about is, and maybe this is just ignorance, I think a lot of older people are under this impression that when you go to another country, you have to get a job there. You don't. Okay, we have this thing called the internet. And now you probably know where I'm going with this, right? You work remotely, you start an online business of some sort. That's much easier said than done, and that's probably going to be one of the biggest deterrents for most people to go out and do this. If you're older, if you've got savings and you have a house, you're willing to sell it and so forth, it might not be such an issue, especially if you're drawing a pension. But for those of us who are a bit younger, more industrious, and are just getting started, then you seriously want to look at your options for doing something over the internet. And it's evolved a lot since I got into it, and it's only continuing to develop, and more opportunities are opening up, especially with AI now, right? I never knew what a prompt engineer was, but you can actually become one. Right? And you can be location independent and continue making a living, a decent living, living in other countries. Now, the thing you want to be cognizant of when going down that route of any kind of online income is who are you working for? By default, most folks, if you're watching this, you speak English, right? Most folks are going to be going for an American company because they pay out in US dollars, as opposed to a Canadian or Australian company that's going to pay you in arguably a weaker currency, right? That's also a huge reason why you probably want to get out of Canada, because if you sit down and think about it, whatever job you're doing, people in the United States are doing the same job, but they're getting paid more, they're paying less taxes, they're paying less in their living expenses. So you're kind of getting shafted like this, right? Now, that's another thing to address before we go any further, right? I've been doing this for a while, been living out of the country for a while. I've come back to visit family and so forth, but I can't see myself ever going and living there again and actually, reintegrating, because the incentives are simply not there, right? Like I just mentioned, there's no point in me going and working in person, hourly, for Canadian dollars, paying taxes in Canada, having to deal with these grossly inflated prices for a subpar experience in many different aspects. One of them that I've mentioned quite a few times here has been dating, right? And we'll get to that in just a second. But generally speaking, that's going to be the biggest barrier, financial. Now, on the plus side, there's a lot of countries where you can have a great quality of life, and it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg to do it, right? I mean, if we look at someone's required monthly expenses in a place like Vancouver, you're single, no one's helping you out, you're not living with family, but you value your privacy, you don't want to live with a roommate. Well, even just for a one bedroom, a decent one, you're looking at least what, $1,500, $2,000 Canadian, maybe even more. And then on top of that, of course, all the other little expenses that come with that, right? You probably need a car to get around. In Europe, it's nice to have a car too, but you can get around just with public transportation just fine here. Now again, like I mentioned, an important caveat to take into account. The younger you are, the more flexible you're going to be, the more tolerant you're going to be of kind of roughing it, so to speak. The older you are, the more you're going to want your creature comforts. But generally, these kinds of videos don't appeal to older people anyways, because you guys, many of you want to stand and fight, so quote unquote. I already made a video about that. You can check it in my channel. Let's consider some other viewpoints and some other concerns that people have, right? People often say, well, what about healthcare, right? Well, there's a lot of other countries where healthcare is going to be great, if not better than what you get in Canada, which is, free. That's the only real saving grace that it has. Look around here, though, in Poland. This is a very modern country now, at least here in the capital, in Warsaw. In Belarus, where I was not too long ago, also very modern, very clean, highly professional people, highly trained, Now, obviously, I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't have to deal with any kind of health complications, thank God. But, this idea that every single other place out there is a dump, you're never going to find qualified doctors, they're not going to speak English, so on and so forth, that's grossly misplaced. These are notions that have somehow continued to linger for the last 20, 30 years, when the world was a lot less connected, a lot less developed and modernized. Other countries are catching up extremely quick. Now, let's point out another caveat. This is an EU country. They have certain standards for pretty much every single member state. If you go somewhere else like Mexico or Colombia or Brazil or Argentina, then of course there's going to be more variance in the standards. But does that mean that you still can't find quality care? No, absolutely you can. A lot of folks go down to Colombia, for example, a personal friend of mine did, to get some work done both cosmetically, so not due to any health issues, but also to actually get some kind of help on that end too. And it's cheaper. Now, there's other concerns to take into account. Probably the biggest thing is, where do you go? Right? That's what you're wondering. You're watching this saying, okay, well, this sounds great, Sebastian, but where should I go? That is something that only you can answer for yourself. And I can provide suggestions, but you might not like them. You might conclude that even though things objectively are not good in Canada right now, that you want to stay and you're willing to put up with it and not deal with the risk of moving somewhere else, uprooting yourself, and dealing with all the variables, all the unknowns that come with it. Especially if you're monolingual. That's probably one of the other major barriers. Most English speakers, well, how many other languages do they speak? Right? So that's a barrier, and if we really want to go down a rabbit hole, some would even say that's intentional. Right? You living in Canada also goes for our brothers in the United States and the United Kingdom. Oh, well, everyone speaks English. I don't have to learn a different language. That's where you're wrong. The world's becoming more globalized. You are at a major disadvantage if you don't speak at least one other language. And I recommend something like Spanish or even Russian. Not that those things are easy to do, but you're going to fall behind, right? The supremacy of these legacy countries, these first world destinations, is declining, and we know it as people who are coming from there, and the world's going to catch up pretty soon. We're in for a hell of a ride in the next, especially come 2030, once this whole, own nothing and be happy agenda starts really, really getting implemented. It's going to be wild. Not to go off on a tangent, but where do you go? Well, a lot of folks, a lot of the younger crowd, they're going to South America, right? Colombia is a very popular destination because it is fairly cheap. You can live a decent quality of life. Now, again, you're going to have to take into account some security risks and the fact that a lot of folks are not that trustworthy. They're not that, how shall we say, they don't follow through that well on some things. That's just something that you have to deal with if you plan to go there. Same thing goes for a lot of places in Latin America. Brazil, Argentina, places like Uruguay or Chile are more developed. They're generally considered safer. So that could be something to look into. I can't speak from personal experience. I haven't been there yet, but I will. Or you look over here, look to Europe. Now, Europe has its own set of problems, and if you talk to the average European, a lot of them, unfortunately, are also kind of brainwashed in that sense, just like your average Canadian. They're like the frog in the pot of boiling water. They don't really understand what's going on until it's a little too late. So while this looks fantastic over here, this looks fun, the energy's great, don't let it fool you, because this isn't indicative of everyone's life, right? There's a lot of people who are at work today. There's a lot of people who are struggling to pay their bills and who have all sorts of other issues with the state and what have you. People who want to get ahead, but they don't see a possibility to do so. People who try to integrate, especially in a country like this where the language is so difficult to grasp. So take all these things into account, right? That's why I say maybe South America is the move, because Spanish is relatively easy to learn for English speakers. And you might be thinking, well, I've never been good at learning languages. You can learn. You have more resources and materials available to you now than ever before in all of human history. You can learn and become proficient in many languages, not all of them, but many, within just a matter of months, especially if you use AI to help you. You spend $20 a month for a subscription to ChatGPT. You can talk to it in any language you want. You can get it to give you quizzes and walk you through the very basics day by day. And if you're consistent and you take your learning seriously, again, you can be relatively conversational within a very short amount of time. What else are people concerned with, right? Where to live, healthcare, money matters. I guess ultimately, like I said, it comes down to your personal preference, right? What place do you feel aligns with your values? What place do you feel is going to give you what you're looking for, right? Because the EU might not be the move for some folks. The EU is arguably more expensive than South America as well. It gave me a bit of a shock when I got to Germany, especially. Germany's not a cheap country. Even when I crossed the border from Belarus back into Lithuania, I was pretty shocked. The prices were, in some places, almost double what I was paying in Belarus. So be considerate of those things. Some people like to go to Southeast Asia, Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia. Some people choose Taiwan or Hong Kong. Some people are really crazy and they go to China. Some people do South Korea, Japan. There are places you can go. The consideration with Asia is that if you don't look Asian, you're never going to fully be able to integrate, right? And this is probably one of the key issues with all of this, right? And something that I've had to accept making the move away from Canada is that countries like Canada, the United States, Australia, UK have been so attractive for so many reasons, because they were able to combine basically all of the best things into one place for for a while until recently, right? Law and order, security, vibrant economies, basically accepting you no matter where you come from and treating you as an economic equal, let's say, right? Giving you the opportunity to get a local ID, get a bank account, go out there, and if you speak passable English, you can go and maybe you don't even speak good English at all, in the case of some South American immigrants, and you're willing to work, you can go drum up business, you can go get a job, and you can make money. Am I simplifying it? Yes, a little bit, obviously, but it's been done. We've all heard of these immigrant success stories, and they happen in these countries because of those very reasons. Now, the balance of power is kind of shifting, as I said. Places in Europe are trying to kind of emulate this, right? They've been trying to push this multicultural acceptance thing now for quite a while in places like particularly Germany, Italy, Spain, and of course we can't forget the UK. That's like ground zero for a lot of this. So consider those things too, depending on your background, how you look, what your heritage is, because we'd like to sugarcoat it and believe that these things don't affect us, but they still do. People do have prejudices. People do have favoritism in some ways. So ultimately, guys, the decision to leave Canada, just pack up and go somewhere else, it's not an easy one for a lot of people, whether you're young or old, whether you already have online income or whether you're brand new to it. Really, it just depends. In my case, the decision was so simple. I never felt at home in Canada. I never felt like I was really being treated very well. It was difficult for me to connect with people and make friends. It was difficult for me to date. It was difficult for me to even kind of figure out what I wanted to do money-wise in a way where, I would actually, my skills and my talents would be recognized, and I'd be able to go out there and enjoy myself, live my life, have time, but also have the resources to feed myself, to put a roof over my head and all that, and have autonomy. Fact of the matter is, decades ago, if I'm not mistaken, you guys can correct me on this, if we're taking the US dollar into account, a dollar back in the 60s, 70s has the buying power now of 60 something dollars. Right? That's an unfathomable jump, right? So if the minimum wage back then was $3 an hour, then that would be equatable to $180 an hour now to be able to have that buying power, right? So that's another thing to consider. The lifestyle, the standards, the circumstances that your parents, your grandparents, if they were in Canada, in the United States or what have you, are completely different from what we can expect to see nowadays. We continue to work and we get less for it. We have to continue giving more of it away to these taxes, and these countries are going to start to get very, very desperate very soon. There are countries like Germany, France, and the like that are already discussing the possibility of taxing you on your worldwide income even if you don't live in the country anymore, just like the United States does. Right now, to my knowledge, the US is the only country that does this. You could expatriate and live outside for a decade or two and you even do a remote job. The US is still going to ask you for your taxes if you're a US citizen. So many people don't realize that, but this is the way I think a lot of countries are going to turn, because they're going to go bankrupt. The people at the top, they don't want to work. They want to hold on to their power, and they want to continue siphoning your life force away. So especially if you're a young person, pay very close attention. Really weigh this out and take it seriously, because the longer you stay, the harder it's going to be for you to actually get out, and you're going to grow more and more attached to the place. It's basically a a version of Stockholm syndrome, if you want to call it that. So, yeah, I know this was a little bit scatterbrained, guys, but at the end of the day, you know, you only have one life. You can only do so much with the resources that you have in a given point. And think about it. You know, if you're in the same position the next 6 months, the next year or two, is that really where you want to be, right? And then think, if it's not, then what do you need to do to change that? What do you need to learn? Who do you need to speak to? You know, how can you set yourself up to be in a better spot? Because it's not impossible. I've done it. I'm not a baller. I'm not thriving by any means. You know, I'm doing okay. It could definitely be better. There's people who have done this, who have come before me, people who have come after me, who are already doing fantastic. They're doing way better. I mean, at least it looks like that. But give yourself some credit, right? Believe that you can do it. It's not all doom and gloom. It's probably my final message here. But there's a reason why most people don't do this, because it isn't easy. It isn't easy to say goodbye to your family and goodbye to your traditions and go learn a different language and try to integrate in a new place where you don't have any friends and just a whole plethora of other issues. But are you going to wait for things to get bad enough, or are you going to decide to be proactive and take your life into your own hands? That's really the ultimate question.